So, welcome again, everybody. And yeah, Tynan, it's great to have you joining us this evening, more with the perspective of being a guest and perhaps sharing a little bit of your story and what brings you to this work. So, we'll ask a few questions as well, but of course, we'll open it up to the floor a bit later on if other people want to ask any questions. But yeah, I think maybe just to start with, just tell us a little bit about what's brought you into this space and the focus of this sort of work around suicide prevention. Maybe a little bit about your story.
For sure. Thanks, JB. My story and my touch of a lived experience of suicide, it basically goes back to, well, in October this year, it'll be 20 years ago. At the young age of 19, I arrived on a job site in the south of Brisbane as a painting apprentice and was taken to the third story of a construction building, where moments later I fell 3 stories down an empty stairwell, landing on concrete. And as you can imagine, it was quite a decent fall, and I broke effectively the entire right side of my body and was in a coma. All my family, friends were told to come to the hospital because I was going to die. And anyway, I survived. But when I woke up, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was, and soon discovered that I'd lost my memory for the previous 19 years of my life. And my memory probably starts from the age of around 20. And in that journey of recovery, well, to be honest, I hate the word recovery, and I hate it with a passion, because early on in the journey, I kept getting told about, yeah, you're on your recovery. And maybe 8, 10, maybe a year into this recovery journey, it started to paint a picture of a life for me that lacked independence, a life for me that was very different to the 20-year-old friends I had around me that were surfing, chasing girls, doing stupid stuff, getting drunk, kicked out of pubs. And yeah, over the time, it sort of manifested into this thought that, yeah, I shouldn't have survived that fall. Like, I really should have died. And that progressed for maybe 6 months. And my memories of life in terms of clarity are pretty clear around, it's probably 18 months, 19 months into my recovery. And I got sent to have an assessment to determine the impairment, like the full-time impairment of my body and my mind. And I turned up to this assessment and I felt pretty confident actually going in there, because there was a lot of negative talk about me in the future. But after this talk, I got this letter that said I have 57% permanent impairment, and I had the IQ of effectively a 9-year-old child, and it wasn't expected to ever change beyond that. That turned the thoughts about something happening that I should have died into thoughts of suicide, and into a wish, just a longing to have that and end the pain. I quite often, like when I talk about it, my son has like this little toy that he calls Door. Like, he's got favorite door and he's got Door, and he takes it with him everywhere. He's 6 now, and he's still, even if he comes into my bed at some hour, there'll typically be a stuffed snake and he'll have favorite door with him. If we go for a hike, we'll put favorite door in the bag, and it comes with him everywhere. And that to me was like suicide. It was with me everywhere. Like, I'd go out with my friends and I'd put on that happy face and be like, yeah, no, I'm having a good time. But seriously, I'd just sit there and be like, nah, it isn't for me. I need to get out of here. It's not a place I wanted to be. And it led me to a place where the day that I had my non-fatal attempt of suicide, and I'm quite a spiritual person. Like, I go to church and I believe in God, and it was in the moments of like my non-fatal attempt that I really felt this hand on me, and also my dog like basically kept me alive. And I sat there and had the biggest realization of my life that I didn't want to die, like, at all. I had nothing I wanted to die, but I just wanted the pain to stop, and like that burden that I carried with me all the time. Like everywhere I went, I just felt like a burden. And even trying to find independence, I couldn't do that because I was still sleeping 18, 20 hours a day, trying to repair my brain. And yeah, I just wanted that to stop. And
Yeah.
it was,
I think just wanted to draw attention to that point you've made about, you know, on one hand you wanted to die, but yeah, on the other, you really didn't. It was about ending the pain. That was a
definitely,
really key thing for you. And I'm just
definitely.
wondering, while you're in that space, can you give us a bit of a sense of your reflections now on the doctor's prognosis and what that prognosis did to you, for you, and what would be your reflections to them now in terms of
For
how they
sure.
might respond?
The reflections on it were, you look at a doctor and, well, maybe not so much now because there's Dr. Google, so they don't have as much esteem. But
Mm.
for me back then, doctors were, they were gods. Like doctors had kept me alive, doctors had performed surgery on my body. And I just had the most respect for what they said and their, I guess, opinion, their medical opinion on my life and my future. And it was to the point that they were sort of saying the and there's nothing wrong with like working for Qantas or something like that, but that was kind of like my dream job. I was like, if I can get a job working as Qantas, just picking up bags, the doctor said you could probably handle that. You might need some help around like getting to work and all this stuff. And they basically said that by the time I was like 40, I'd be living in basically a retirement village.
Mm.
But what it did to me is their opinions became my reality. And the more that it got confirmed by a variety of different specialists, it really just became, rather than me living a life where I could make decisions and try things and do all that, it was already determined for me. It was like they've given me the last chapter of my life and said, don't worry about the rest. This is where you're going to be at. And on reflection now, and after the, like, my lived experience of suicide was effectively born, the first thing I did was go, I need to change that. I need to adjust that. That's their opinions, but it doesn't have to be my reality. And everyone has an opinion. And sure enough, they're looking at it from a medical perspective of going, okay, we don't want to set ourselves up to set this guy up for failure, but there's flexibility in that, and it's not hard. And that really drove me, like, in my recovery of, like, after getting that 57% and realizing that I wanted to live, I knew that I had to go beyond their opinions. So the first thing I did was to jump into a place of, okay, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to prove everything that they've said about me wrong. And it started, like, stubbornness is a it's a pretty good trait to have in some aspects, I think.
Yeah, fascinating. And so, so you end up in this place where really suicide becomes the option that you feel is a preferred one, or perhaps it's the one you should be taking, given this kind of saying you should be dead in the minds of some people.
Mm.
Yeah, that must have been really challenging. And then, so what switched? What happened? You said you had a non-fatal attempt.
Yeah.
So what brought you out of that? And yeah.
And I don't remember, to put it in context, I remember we had Foxtel, and at that point Foxtel played every month. They would play the same stuff over and over again every day. And my brother, he still laughs about it, but he would come home for a week and I'd be, hey bro, I watched this movie today. It was pretty awesome. And it'd be the same movie every day. I would be like, I watched this movie. And he'd be like, this guy. But so somewhere after that, I don't know if it was in the week or the day, I saw the 1995 Hawaii Ironman, and on it was a guy called John McLean who lives in Sydney, and he was going to be the first wheelchair athlete to complete the Hawaii Ironman in a wheelchair. And they interviewed him, and he was in his wheelchair, and they said, "What's your message?" And he goes, "I got a message out there for someone." And he leant forward in his wheelchair, and it just grabbed me. I was just like even now I'm feeling that moment. But he leant forward and he said, "Yeah, I got a message for someone probably even in my own country of Australia. And that is, life happens to all of us. And it's not about what happens to you, it's about what you do once it's happened." And that literally grabbed me. And I went, I'm going to do an Ironman. And at this point, I've got still recovering from broken hip, some surgery, and saying crazy things. And yeah, my brother and friends and family they remember me saying, "Yeah, I'm going to do an Ironman," and they all just went, "This guy's really lost the plot." But that was where it started.
Yeah. And so, and now you're training for another Ironman. Is that right? How many have you done?
So today I've now done 12 Ironman, and training for number 13.
Wow.
But that journey towards the first Ironman, it was one of the best journeys for me. I mean, when I first started to run, because I'd broken my hip, I had to break all this calcification that had built all around my hip. So running for maybe 3-4 months felt like I had a lead weight strapped to me, and it was painful. I had to break it up. But my brother and my mate, they would run with me. They'd run backwards in front of me. They'd run circles around me, and they just brought humor into it. And I hadn't really had that humor in my life. And despite they were making fun of me, I still found it fun. And I literally just kept going, "I'm going to beat you both one day. I'm going to beat you both." And yeah, my brother can't beat me now, which is great. And my friend who was running circles around me, he did 2 triathlons. He beat me at the first one. The second one, I ran past him, slapped him in his DTs and said, "Not anymore, buddy." And that was it. He pulled out.
Amazing. So I'm wondering about the people around you. And I've heard in some of your other talks that you've given about a particular person who spent a lot of time just hanging out with you, sort of whether you were fully there or not, or maybe you were sleeping. Can you tell us about what was going on there and what that meant for you?
My mate Simo, yeah, the best mate I could ever have. He was an apprentice electrician, and he would come and sit at my house. Like, he'd come see me before he'd go to work. He'd come after work and sit there. Like weekends, he'd come over, spend maybe the whole day there, and he'd sit there sometimes. I wouldn't even speak to him. I would just ignore that he was even there. I'd go and have a sleep for 5 hours, come back, and he'd still be sitting there. And he just treated me like I was normal. Like, he didn't treat me like there was anything wrong with me. He didn't treat me like I had no future. He just spoke to me about, like, he'd chat to anyone else. And it wasn't until sort of training for Ironman that I reflected back to how significant that was in my life, to have that person that just sat there, and he didn't have to say anything, and he didn't have the right words. And many times I didn't want him to be there, but by having someone show compassion and just treat you like a mate was really special, like really, really special.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. So, and in a way, I mean, we've got no idea about his story, beyond his connection to you. But even as someone without lived experience necessarily, without knowledge of suicide or these sorts of incidents, sounds like a pretty critical role he's played.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, like, the other thing that I sometimes talk about is the other side of the people around me as well. And I call it the shoot off. And I often talk to a lot of people, and as a society, we should all over ourselves, very often. And what I mean by that is people around me would be, you should be able to do this. You shouldn't still be like worrying about that. You should just worry about that, get over that. And all I really wanted was more people like Simo to just to listen. And I find that by them shooting all over me, that early on in my journey, like I would do the same to other people. I'd chat to people who'd be upset and stuff. And I'd just be like, you should be grateful. Like you woke up this morning, you had a bed, like you had this. And I remember like one day I caught myself, I don't know, like reflecting on it while I was out on a run, and I just went, what am I doing? Like I sort of reflected back on how that impacted my life. So yeah.
And looking back, I'm just wondering about if you had wishes for the Tynan that was in those times of struggle, thinking about attempting suicide and maybe in the weeks and months after, if there had been sort of particular lived experience people around you, what would you have liked to have heard from them, or what messages, what actions, what do you think would have benefited you?
In the months and even the years after it, that's really hard. I mean, I never spoke about my lived experience of suicide until 2016. I maybe twice did in 2015, and that is probably 13 years after it happened. And I was ashamed of it, like, to be honest. And had anyone spoken to me about it, I would have denied that I'd ever had it. Like I wouldn't have accepted it. I would have said, no, that never happened. And no one knew that it had happened because of the way that I did it. It just went. And yeah, it was a hard question to answer, because I don't know that. I think back then as well, suicide was not really spoken about. And I know that there was a couple of times that I did things where I'd say, like, I just wish I was dead, and like put my hand in a fan and stuff like that. And people again just be, oh, don't be silly, like don't worry about that. And that was standard. Like that was how we spoke about it.
Yeah. I've got a note here again from one of your other talks, and I can't quite remember what the context of it was, but it's got the words "cured of suicide" in inverted commas. I'm just wondering what that prompts in you.
It brings me to training for my first Ironman, actually training for triathlon in general. The first triathlon I ever finished was at Bribie Island, which is north of Brisbane. It was a 300-meter swim, 13-kilometer bike ride, 3-kilometer run, and I finished it, and I just felt invincible. But at that point, like I still, to be honest, like I still had thoughts, the occasional thoughts about maybe this is too hard, like maybe I've set myself up for too much of an objective. But leading into my first Ironman, Port Macquarie, in 2007, I was dabbling with the idea that I would be able to, if I'd completed the Ironman, I'd be able to go to university and get an education and pursue some other things, like some other avenues. And leading to it, I literally had this thing that if I get through that, it's going to cure me, like cure me from the thoughts of suicide, like cure me from that. And I kind of looked at it as though, like, to be honest, I looked at it like I had this thing attacking me inside, and I really needed to just show it that, you know what, you may be part of my life forever, but I'm going to take control of it. And as I sort of got literally for the last 100 meters of my first Ironman, I remember just stopping and just staring like into the dark behind me and just going, holy dooly, like I'm going to do this. And I crossed the finish line. I did, like, I felt like I sort of had that control over it, and I could do, like, I kind of looked at it like a superpower, that I'd had this lived experience and no one knew about it. But when I'd really hurt and go into really, really hard places in life, whether or not it was training or other conversations, I'd tap into it and go, hang on, you've been here before and look where you are now, you've come out of it. And I sort of looked at it as though, like, I've built up such a strong foundation in my life because I've been to the pits. Like, I've been as low as I could possibly ever go, and I've dug my way out. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to end up with times in my life where I still have crappy days and things don't go my way. And I probably have many times a year where I would rate myself as being maybe a 2 out of 10 or 1 out of 10. But I sort of have faith that I've got the foundation there to get up and get out of it.
Fantastic. So I've got heaps of questions, but I feel like it's time to give other people an opportunity. If you guys have got anything you'd like to put to Tynan,
The only other thing I will say is that 2016, when I got invited to our Voice of Insight training down in Townsville, a friend of mine who her brother died by suicide, and randomly one day we were just chatting, and we'd always had this connection, and it wasn't like sexual. Like, she was married, I was married, but we just got it. Like, we just got each other. And one day we were drinking at a function, and I said, "Oh, she spoke about suicide," and I said, "Yeah," I said, "I've got my own like past of it." And she went, "Oh, you've got a lived experience." And I went, "A what?" And she goes, "A lived experience." I went, "Yeah, I guess so." And anyway, that was when we sort of connected, and she invited me to go to the training, and I went down there. I still didn't really know what it was. And over 2 days, learned about my story, like learned about it. And I articulated it for the first time to a group of people. And honestly, they're like, "Who wants to go first?" I'm like, "Yep, I'll do it." And I got up and I tried to open my mouth, and I just went, and just in my chest, like, I thought I was going to have a heart attack or something. And when I spoke about it, and I shared that I had a lived experience of suicide, and I spoke about it, whatever was on my chest, it went off. And I just remember going, I've carried that around for the last 13 years of my life. And it just blew me away. And to be honest, that's what inspires me now to sort of be involved in suicide prevention, to give people a place where they don't have to carry that around.
Beautiful. Wow. So jump in if you, or John, you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll ask a question. Tynan, it was interesting having a conversation, and a fellow who had a non-fatal attempt at suicide, right? And his discussion was almost like, with my ideation, right? I didn't understand his story. So there was almost like he felt like there was a grade of suicide survival, So,
Right.
how I was just be interested in, like, as someone with both sharing your story and vast experience talking to others, right? How do you feel that works? Is that something?
There definitely, like, I don't see it. Like, I don't see a difference. Like, I don't rate people's lived experiences, but a lot of people do have this inferiority thing where they'll go, "Oh, my story is not as good as your story," or "That's not as good as that person's story," and people won't share. And I do hear it from time to time, and people, like, sometimes people will get in these arguments with people who are bereaved or people who are carers and go, "Oh, well, you don't really know what it's like for me, and you don't know what it's like for me." And that's why I always just come back and say, I don't know exactly what it's like for you, but I know that there's as much wisdom and value in your story as there is in mine, as what as there is in yours, John and JB and everyone on this, that there is wisdom in there. And that if you get into a place where you're comfortable to share your story, and a place where you want to share your story, or you want to do something with it, even if that's just to have a conversation with the closest person to you in your life, then there's power in that, and there's power in that for yourself as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Also, too, I just, if I can add one more thing on the end, do you think that there's an organizational bias around people who have, if like where you are positioned almost, like, and forgive me if this triggers anyone, the idea whether you were thinking about it in the car park, walked to the edge, or actually, jumped and survived, right? Do you think there's any kind of, I don't know, judgment, rating, right? Sense of, difference to that?
I definitely don't, and I'll throw it out to other people to comment as well. Like for me, I don't. And again, it's that's why when we talk about lived experience, like I'll always talk about whether or not you've had thoughts of suicide, you've had a non-fatal attempt, you've cared, or you've been bereaved, that no matter where you are in that, we still want to hear from you. Like, I still want to have a conversation with you, and if you want to have it. But I think that the other thing is that if you've got a lived experience of suicide, there's no pressure on you to share it. And I think sometimes people might have that thing about if they go to a workshop or they go to something, if they announce that they've got one, they might feel there's pressure for me now to do something, which there's not. I mean, I've been involved in many workshops where people share their story once and that's it. And that's great. That for them, that is fine. That is like a massive part of their life that they've been able to get out and verbalize. Sam.
Yeah, mate. Thanks for sharing. That was an awesome story. But you said about your mate sort of sitting beside you, and you sort of said about lived experience workers. We're trying at the moment to sort of look at the community connector sort of space. Was it something you actually found valuable, that if you had someone that knew resources that were available in community, knew social groups at the time, would that have been something you used, or?
It's hard to say. I mean, to comment on that without the wisdom that I have today is really hard. And to reflect back to where I was, I got to put it in the context that I had brain damage and my brain didn't really, it didn't function that well. Like I needed to have a lot of sleep and I couldn't really process things and process thoughts and all that stuff. But if I can speak about today and the work that I've been involved in with suicide prevention, that there is so much power in having networks for people that have a lived experience, that can sit there with you and just be someone who has walked it similar. Like I often talk about it in terms of lived experience, and that peer-to-peer aspect is someone who understands the chapters of your story. They don't know all that's happening between it because that's different for everyone. But in those chapters, they just have that, you have that ability just to get it, and you don't need to explain it. And they're the people that you can sit with. And like I had a conversation today with a guy that recently had an attempt on his life, and I was just able to sit there with him and just have a conversation, and for him to go, I get it. I get what you're talking about. Like I've been there, and that's it. That's all I had to say. And he just goes, man, thank you. That was it. That was it.
With sort of what you know now, but we're trying to steer away from the clinical style, like that we get guys, your rural health, for example, down here, that's the same sterile sort of room, but meeting them in a park or down beside a river or on the tailgate of a ute or something like that, like just so it's not as clinical. Is that something that's
that? Yeah, I mean, I think everyone on here would probably have some form of experience in. There's a place for clinical, but there is a massive untapped area of the non-clinical where we can support people and give them alternatives to going to hospital, give them an alternative to going to a doctor, but still have people that have got a little bit of understanding about, okay, these are services available. These are groups of people you can connect with. Here's someone that you can call if stuff gets really bad for you, that you possibly may need to go to hospital, but let's call your mate first and see if you can have a conversation with him and keep yourself safe.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Sam. Glenn.
First, Tynan, mate, thank you for that. It was, I know it's a hard thing to do at times, and I'm going to be honest, it resonated for me because I've been through a very similar thing. I was involved in a motorcycle accident that may as well have been fatal. It was fatal for me for 3 times. Then they helicoptered me to Canberra and put me in a coma for 8 days. So everything you're talking about really did resonate, and my family was told that I wouldn't survive the helicopter trip. And for the first 3 days, they were told that I wasn't going to survive and to get, the appropriate people in. But we're stubborn bastards, mate. We just keep going. And when I walked out of hospital, I was told I had no right to actually walk out of the hospital. But I know now that prior to that, I'd had quite an amount of suicidal ideation, or I now know that accident deep down was from the fact that I just didn't care at that point in time, and that was probably what caused the accident. That was a byproduct of suicidal ideation, but it resonated for me too, because I talked about it briefly with some friends, but nobody got it. And then I also got a chance to do a Roses Voices workshop, and got the chance to sit down and look at my story and present it to a group of people who were like-minded. And that in itself was a huge change for me, to be able to sit down and actually verbalise it and say it out loud, because before then I'd been invited to talk to some events, but I kept telling myself I had no right to stand up and talk about it because I didn't have it. But then I actually had to sit down and really realise that I did, and that was where I had been, and that was what had caused a lot of my issues. And then I'd been fighting, admitting I had suicidal ideation for years and years and years. But it was that acceptance that was where I was, and the chance to talk about it gave me the opportunity to go out and talk and now do what we do as lived experience peer workers, and sit down with people on that daily basis and work. As you said, Sam, yesterday I spent 2.5 hours sitting on a rock on a beach with someone. Or, as Gabriel knows, we go and sit where we need to, in a park, in a coffee shop, or whatever, and leave as much clinical stuff behind as we can, and just have conversations and, do a 2-hour conversation that doesn't get clinical at all. It just talks about life and where they are. The simple fact that you can talk to someone that understands parts of it makes a massive difference. You have no idea how much of a difference that makes to people. And I'm thankful to groups like this where we can sit down and talk about it and appreciate it. We're all doing the best we can. There's days that are rubbish, and there's days that we struggle to get up out of bed, but we just get up and we keep doing it. I really appreciate the fact that you shared, mate, and proud to be able to be part of the group.
Thanks, Glenn.
Good on you. Thanks, Glenn. Gabrielle.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tynan. It was really special to hear your story. Connected a lot with it. Just 2 quick things I wanted to speak a little bit to what you were saying, John, about that hierarchy stuff. I feel like that comes up more for me in terms of sharing my lived experience than it does for the other side, if that makes sense. I know for me, I have, imposter syndrome about my lived experience, and often think, as you were talking, I was reflecting that I'd had a similar experience of a serious injury that was, sent me to hospital for a while and pretty hard to come back from. But the point that actually made me most suicidal was around body image concerns. And, that in itself is very stigmatized, I think, for men. And so, yeah, it's just interesting. I think lived experience is so complex like that. But Tynan, I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned hating the word recovery, and I was reflecting a bit about also the way that we talk about lived experience being the past. And I wonder if there's a way we can, I feel like when I'm working with people, I want to try and be more transparent that I haven't recovered. I'm still I still have shit days. I'm still recovering,
Mhm.
and I just wonder how we can do that better, because I don't want people to think that I'm fixed and I'm trying to fix them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Could you
Yeah,
speak to that at all?
definitely. And other people feel free to comment as well. All right, I'll go. Look, I've had conversations with that too, and there's obviously like the myth that people will say once you've had thoughts of suicide, like you'll always be in that place, which is not the case. But once you've had thoughts of suicide, for most people that I've spoken to, it's always going to be there as an option for them. And a lot of people, it's a protective factor. It's a protective factor for the past and things that they've been through and the traumatic events that have happened and circumstances in life that for them, it's a thing that goes, well, if you take that away from me, then that's the day I'm going to tap out. But in terms of what do we do around it and how do you do it? That's where lived experience comes in, and that's where the power of lived experience is. And there is often talk about lived experience, and then people will say living experience. Like for me, I'll say lived experience. Like who I am today is built on my lived experience, and it's still happening. But the lived experience part of my life and my lived experience of suicide, it grows, but I still operate out of a place that who I am and how I value the world and how I treat others and how I can articulate things and have conversations with people on some pretty deep levels that would scare most people comes from my lived experience. And my lived experience, like it is still living, but it's from what I have lived in life. Does that make sense? Like I think it always grows, but it's still my lived experience and it comes out in how I am.
That's helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I really like, oh, sorry, carry on.
Go on.
I was just going to say, I really like the idea. My personal view is I like the idea of living and life experience, right? Because it's the sense of transition, right? So, at a certain point, if we go on the hero's journey, and I agree, recovery is a dirty word, but the idea of I often talk about going on that hero's journey, stepping over, facing what is, and then once you choose to deal with it and you get through it, I totally agree, Tynan. The concept is there with you, right? So you have good processes, so you don't go there anymore. It's not a despairing place, but it is a real option, right? So it stays with you, but also too, you develop the wisdom and practice to keep away from that edge, right? And then you want to share and understand that and say, hey, it's going to hurt, but there is light and there is possibility and there are steps to take that you want to share that. It's almost like the hero's journey where you are reborn with wisdom that you then want to pass on to the community. So I quite like that point where I got up to I survived, and then I reborn with wisdom, and my living experience is about making that useful to people, right? That's just how I feel about it, but yeah, but I was really interested, Gary, in the way the imposter syndrome. There's this sense of having to say, right, I haven't suffered enough,
Yeah.
right, and it's like that comes straight out of the stigma around and the culture around mental health and suicide. Right, looking at it as a failure, it's almost like when you are so sick or you are so hurt or you're so beaten up or that you're actually, I think the only success in that view is death, right? And at least I was acceptably dead to the community, right? And I just think like that's such an important point, because like it's a horrible concept. Right. And I hear you, and I know what you talk about. We've all kind of touched that place before, but B, it's imposed on us, right? That stigma. And it's like, what drives me batty at the moment is it's okay not to be okay. Right. And on the surface, that's a good take, but it's just not true. And that's what annoys me. I'd love to say it, but if you know, like, you know, as you brought up, where the people who go through this feel like they failed, right? I haven't had enough suffering, right? I haven't been torturing myself enough. Maybe I could do another 6 months of, you know, hiding, you know, being in the darkness. And I think that's imposed. That's that whole, oh, it's okay to not be okay, which is meaningless because no one is, you know, the people aren't grasping it. They're still, you know, until we really make an inroad to stigma, I think that will change. But anyway, thanks for, sorry, I thought that was really
Oh,
a great point to make, mate.
absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that, John. Yeah.
I think maybe with Tynan, the idea, I haven't suffered enough, so I'm going to do another triathlon.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bloody Iron
Jason.
Man.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
I
To be
thought,
honest, that was my coping for a long time, and I didn't reflect on it until I changed therapists a couple of years ago. And they said, "What do you do for self-care?" I said, "Oh, I'll go ride my bike for 6 hours. If I come back with a problem, I'll go for another 2. If I come back, I'll go run for a couple of hours, and then troubles are gone." And they went, "That's not self-care." I went, "What do you mean?" They go, "Where's the space to like think about what's going on in your world?" And I went, "I think about stuff all the time." And they went, "That's just noise." I went, "Oh."
it's like
Anyway,
poking
sorry,
the bruise, mate.
I
Yeah.
was taking the mickey a little bit, but Jason, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, I was actually found it interesting, John, with your comment then around the, you know, it's okay to not be okay. That's actually a philosophy I've quite embraced at the moment. But I guess the making sure, like, I focus on the language around, you know, it's okay not to feel okay, because, you know, we're all gonna have crap days. Whereas that, you know, the philosophy of it's okay not to be okay seems a lot more like, you know, I'm not okay, whereas you're acknowledging that, you know, today I'm not feeling okay. And I think that's, you know, in the work I do with the guys up here, it's that, you know, that stoicism, you know, like we're just going to soldier on no matter what, everything's fine. But, you know, it's for me, that really helps me to acknowledge that, you know, oh, look, I am struggling today, and that's just part of the challenge of life. It's part of the journey. So yeah, I don't know, it's just it's interesting how, I guess, people perceive different messages and what resonates with some people and not others. And I think around that, you know, around the language we can use, one of the things I wrote down as you were speaking, Tynan, was, you know, around that, like, hope, I guess, because it really felt like, you know, the way those doctors made those comments, you know, realistically, did you feel that kind of took away your hope?
Definitely. And that was the whole thing about recovery. I'm going, how is that recovery? Like, how are you telling like a 20-year-old that they've got no chance of independence, and that I'm always going to have to live with my mum because I couldn't remember if I've eaten food or if I have to take medication. I may not be responsible enough to do that, and take it away. You know, as you talk about this, it's okay not to be okay, and about the perceptions, it sort of leads me to think about the people that we have these conversations with. And for example, like when I first started going through my divorce and family court, I had about 3 months where everyone that I spoke to, I would give them this story. And then one day a really good friend said, "Tynan, not everyone wants to hear that." And I went, "You're right." And it's the same with, like, now, if I'm not having a good day, there's some people that I won't tell them that because they don't have the emotional capacity to do that. But I do have people around me that I'll pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I just want to let you know today's a crap day for me." And they'll go, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I'll go, "No, I just want to let you know." And then they'll send me a text later that day and just go, "Do just let you know I'm thinking of you, bro, or something like that. And that's the one thing that I think with this whole, it's okay to not be okay. It needs that. It needs to be put in context that talk to the right people and talk to people who care about you, people who you trust and respect. And by doing that, but when you share with someone that you're not feeling okay today, it gives that person, if they're a really good person, it gives them that space and that comfort to go, actually, 6 months down time, I'm not feeling okay. But Jason called me when he wasn't feeling okay. I'm going to call Jason because he gets it. And they'll call you and just go, hey, bud, I'm just not feeling good today. And that grows. Like that's what I like about messages. And sometimes it misses in the finer details and people take it literally and go, oh, okay, I'm not feeling well today. I'm going to put a post on Instagram and let everyone in the world know, hey, I'm not okay today. Which for some people that's their outlet, but I think it's also to have those intimate relationships with people that really can look after you and call you out and know what's going on in your world. So when you do say, yeah, everything's good, they'll go, you know what? I don't believe you right now. I've noticed this about you and I've noticed that about you. Should we go to the pub? Should we go for a walk in the park or a run?
Yeah. I guess,
Beautiful.
sorry, I was just going to say to clarify, I get triggered by things like, are you okay? And it's okay not to be okay. Not because of the concept of supporting someone and letting someone, know that it's okay, that what they're going through is normal and part of life and should be supported and normalized. It's that it's like the message is, people leave it at the message and they, by ticking the message, they believe it's enough. Right. And, now I find it hilarious that one of the occupations that are least tolerant of people having, say mental health challenges or mental well-being issues are psychologists. They will, they will have to go before a panel and prove that they're okay to continue to practice, right? And so there are psychologists I know that would never reveal to anyone in the industry that they are actually doing it tough, right? So I find it's really not okay to be to not be okay in some professions. Jason, in that environment up north, right? We have to change what it means to be stoic, because stoics don't suffer in silence. They accept, surrender, and do something about it. It's their response, right? I got a stoic page up at the moment because I love that concept. It's about a misunderstanding about what is, what we do about the hard times. None of us operate as an island, and we need to, make sure that men understand that strength is actually about overcoming our reluctance to share and ask for support. Does that make? Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think that's.
And I'm interested in what others might think as well about what is the message that we need to give to men around that. Like if it's and to be honest, John, like the whole "Are you okay?" thing, like the actual words, I do not really know many people that like being asked, "Are you okay?" Like that is such a confronting thing for many people.
Yeah.
But like, how do we do it as men? Like, what do we do? What works?
I'm wondering, I've got a slightly different take. I'll come to you in a second, Sam, got your hand up. But I'm thinking that it's actually an important message for us to take into some workplace type contexts, particularly where we actually point out that it is apparently not okay to not be okay in this workplace. That's what our policies are saying. That's what our culture is saying, is that actually, if you're not okay, well, you shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
It's not actually making space for it.
Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah, agree with John over what you were saying there, that there is a big stigma down here still that, it's not okay to not be okay. Guys reaching out, and we've found a very female heavy workforce, especially services. a lot of those women, a lot of those people that get into those roles have a preconceived idea of men, so they treat men a lot differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the "Are you okay?" messages and stuff, they become too fucking stereotyped. It's too commercial. You ask someone, "Are you okay?" Your back goes up.
Yep.
Instead of going, "Hey mate, how you going?"
Mm.
Or "Hey mate, what's going on?"
Yeah.
Just having a simple chat.
Yeah, just being curious, right? That we don't need a formula for that. You just asked a bloody question, you know? Yeah.
I was only saying it to someone the other day because I sat there and watched Vikings before the end of last year, and after every battle, they'd sit there.
Yeah.
They sit shoes off. They're all drinking mead. They're dancing. They're laughing. They're joking.
Yeah.
We've become so scripted, and so this is what we have to say. This is what we have to do. We all try and have conversations over phones now. We've taken that human connection out of it. We've lost, just having a good old chat again. Having a chat at a pub on a Friday with 2 or 3 beers and having a yarn of the blokes before you go home to the old lady sort of thing. Get it back to the basic ways of things.
Yeah. There was so much, like I was just going through, I'm giving a speech at a Rotary, and I was just going through some history, right? And just checking in. Our parents or our grandparents, right, were part of, right, they were part of that, blokes, our dads and grandfathers, they were Rotary, Lions, Apex, Masons, they were part of the local school building fund, they just were engaged. Now, there are many things we do better these days, right? We have better conversations. We understand that being vulnerable is important, but we've lost those wonderful structures that supported men even when they didn't know they needed support, right? So it's not like things are worse than they were, right? Those guys went through amazing shit, but they had men around them that could hold them even when they weren't intentionally talking about mental health, right? They were just doing it as a social structure. That's my thought.
Men were allowed.
Interesting.
Sorry?
Men were men.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and but what is a man, right? We don't need to define that. If you turn up and you're a good bloke and you're looking to improve and follow the responsibilities of being a bloke, like if you sign up for something, you follow through, the code, the Stoic code, all of those things, right? We can accept, they accepted such a range of men, right? And there wasn't a need to the blokes were looked after because it was more important to be a brother than it was to be a bro, right? That's my, I'm on this bloody sock today.
Gabrielle. Gabrielle, you're just on mute, mate.
So is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to share from my experience that when I was at my worst, and like what helped me was a close mate actually reaching out and sharing that they weren't okay, and then that gave me permission to tell them that I wasn't okay. So I feel like there's a big relationship here to the lived experience stuff. Like, I don't know, just that friend, I might have reached out to them and they were a good friend, but then the fact that they reached out to me and said, described something that they, just experienced a panic attack, didn't know what it was, talked a bit about, struggling with the similar stuff that I was going through. And then suddenly I was like, oh, I can help you by talking about what I'm going through. And then we had a thing. And it was, I don't know, like I just wanted to add that element of it suddenly became okay to be saying I wasn't okay and so I felt there's that ripple effect of like, if we are telling other people that we're not okay, then we become safe people to say they're not okay back to.
Yeah.
But I
agree. Leading with vulnerability kind of idea.
Yeah. But then I agree at a systemic level, like it's really hard because society is saying, no, this is what men are, and you're up against it in terms of the system and workplaces and the media and ads for Jason Bourne or whatever.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabrielle. Glenn.
Yeah, look, and I mean, it's interesting to listen. I mean, look, as you know, for me, I am an RUOK ambassador, and I was basically, I will work on the fact that if somebody hadn't reached out to me in 2018 and asked me if I was okay, I doubt I'd be sitting here, because like every other person, I kept saying, yeah, I was okay. But on that day, I actually realised I wasn't, and I had to say, no, I'm not okay. Now, I'm not a fan of an ambassador since 2018, but we actually joke that down in regional areas, down in rural areas, we just tend to look at each other and go like, you okay, or you all right? The main thing that I use Are You Okay for, to be honest, is to actually get into places. It gets us in the door. It gets me in the door to talk to people. And as long as we can start a conversation, we'll use any word to start a conversation with people. But it's also the fact that we can sit down and say, well, mate, no, I'm not okay. I'm not okay every day. There's some days that are just absolute shit. There's days I don't want to get out of bed and come to work. So it's again, but we get there, we get up, we keep going. And, as you said, John, we're stoic, we keep going. But there's days where we just don't want to do it. We're not 100%, but we keep going.
Yeah.
If we can share the people we're sitting with, it lets them know that, they're not beyond help, or they're not undeserving of help.
They're not alone as well.
They're not alone. And if, we could be down there, and I was sitting down there, with great ideas of not being worth anything and the imposter syndrome. And for me, at my worst point, I was the deputy chair of the local suicide prevention network.
There you go.
I was going home and sitting there contemplating how I was going to end my life. So, that imposter syndrome is real. And even now, when in the mental health industry, that's what we are. We're counsellors, but we still feel that we're not at times allowed to be vulnerable. And I've had the conversation with, line managers that, I'm not doing real good at the moment, but that doesn't mean I can't do my job. Okay, we're not doing real good, but we're okay, and we recognise it, and we learn to recognise it. We can work around it. But any way we can start a conversation, any way we can get people to realise that just because they're not, and I've had conversations with people who are of this opinion that they need to be happy every day. Life needs to be spectacular every day. Guys, life's shit 4 days out of 5. Just the thickness ages. It's okay to just, get through and be happy every day. You don't have to be spectacular.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for that, Glenn. And it's good to, remind us in a way that we've got beefs with all sorts of messages like Are You Okay? And they're awesome campaigns and programs that have obviously kicked off massive conversations in many ways. I'm mindful of time, and John's got a bit of a question, which I think we should come to in a moment. I'd like to just finish off our chat with Tynan. Just one more question to you, Tynan, to say, where are you heading now? And just what are your self-care hints? Obviously, you've mentioned a little bit about before about the place of exercise and events and stuff. But what does self-care really look like to you now? And where are you heading? Where are you going?
I'll come to self-care first. So self-care for me now is a variety of things. Like I spend a lot of time in nature, and I'll go on these epic hikes, like deep into the rainforest by myself, just me, my machete, some secateurs, some pink tape, and I'll just follow a map and just spend time just walking through the jungle and get to these beautiful places and just sit there. And that allows me to do like two things. One is just to have time to myself, and the other is something which I've learned, which now I know is called emotional agility. And I'll spend time just going through my life and just go, what have I got in my life right now that's bringing me joy? Why is that bringing me joy? What have I got in my life that I'm sad about? And I'll just sit with it and say, like, what am I angry about? What am I looking forward to? And it just allows me to be not really to, sometimes like emotions are negative. Like we always talk about the good emotions. Like I think every emotion is great. Like it's feedback on what's happening. And by spending time just allowing me to be angry or to be upset or to be whatever, like excited about things, it makes me more self-compassionate to myself, so that when things aren't going well and I'm not feeling good about something, I don't get down on myself. I just go, okay, today is not a good day. This is why I'm feeling that. And that's okay. And it doesn't mean that I'm any less of a man. It just means that this is how I'm responding to things that have happened. And it also helps me to prompt if I need to check in with like a psychologist or EAP or something like that, or even just my good friends around me that are within my network. And if I hang on something for too long, if I can't get rid of it, I'll start with my friend Sam, who's a social worker and therapist, and she'll drag me for a walk. And after 4 hours of interrogation from her, I normally knuckle down and figure out what's going on. But it just gives me that space to explore what's happening in my world. And that's the biggest thing for me. Like I still exercise a fair bit and I do a bit of CrossFit and stuff now as well. But yeah, it's more time with myself. And every time I do those things, like I'm a super extrovert, but the more that I'm working in suicide prevention now, I like to have days where I just come home and I don't talk to anyone, and I just sit there, like put my phone on sleep mode and might play my guitar or like read a book or something and just be there. And I'm okay with that. Whereas I used to always have to be around people. But I think that self-care, like I've heard many people on here talk about it, that self-care changes, and it's not something to just figure out once in your life and then stick to that. Like it's something that you need to constantly be looking at. In terms of where am I going in life, with life in general, I was so hesitant to come into the world of suicide prevention for a long time because I thought it'll be something I can volunteer in, but because I'm passionate about it, it's something that I won't be able to put down. And I guess I was blessed to do Lifeline for 18 months before I came into it. And I realized that when I'd leave Lifeline, I could put it down and I didn't bring it home with me. Like it wasn't a thing. And it sort of, I went, okay, I've got that ability now. I've got big visions and big expectations on myself, and I really want to, a couple of things I would like to do in the next like short term is I want to grow this network and really have it available as a resource for Australia for people who are doing research, people who are developing policy, to come to us and say, all right, let's not just sit in a boardroom and discuss what men lead. Let's go to men and have that conversation with men and find out really what they need. And I mean, there's 7 of us here right now, but we've all got connections with countless men in our lives that we can talk about and we can get that feedback for. And to have that within Australia is a really big thing. Like it's really, really cool. I really like the way that things are being co-designed now, and that contribution to developing like aftercare, like post-vention support, like all that kind of thing. I'm quite interested in all that. And yeah, I just want to get as much understanding of where I am now and just give myself space to grow and be open to things that come up. But I don't really have any hard, firm, that's where I want to go. Like I'm not wanting to ever be Prime Minister. And I don't know why I use that example. I couldn't imagine being in politics.
Cool. Thank you so much, Tynan. It's an incredible story, and great to have your wisdom, your experience, everything that you've shared. I've put a couple of links, guys, into the chat from some other YouTube videos and things that Tynan's put together. So
You didn't.
look them up. I did. Just part of the research that I did.
I'm your
Um,
third subscriber, Tynan.
Yeah. Yeah, powerful stuff. So thank you so much. Before we close, a couple of moments on John's couple of questions here. I'm going to jump in on your first one. What to call some blokes in this sort of in that space? While we were chatting earlier, I thought we should rename this group the Stubborn Bastards group. But yeah,
that would probably be more attractive to most blokes. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's not completely, out of the question in my mind. Yeah. So we got the question, you're looking to create a group of men that are signed up to support other blokes in your online community. You've been trying to work out what to call them: community peer volunteers, men's peer workers. Bloody mates in construction have stolen,
And top blokes, right? A woman
Top
comes up
blokes.
with that one, right? And then
Yeah,
suddenly,
yeah.
So, like, and it's just that, like, I'm looking for something that, like you touched on there with the bastards, something that says, it's nothing, a bloke is qualified by virtue of him going through life and getting this far, right? Being a survivor, is proven by the fact he's there and he's willing to open up and care for another guy just by having a conversation, and sometimes, tough love is also part of it, right? Saying, what are you doing? So, that whole, as Sam talked about, the masculinity of it, we don't want to, identify that it's different, right? The blokes haven't signed up to the industry. So I don't want, so clearly that's not a good marketing option. I saw a horrendous stat the other day where they say only about 3% of new counsellors are men, and more than 60% of all psychologists, and the psychologists that are left, most men go into corporate psychology, not clinical. So, I'm just what do I call them? Good. I don't want to be corny. I don't want to be break, but I want them to know that we sort of tick them off as ready to support another guy, just with some basic training, trauma-informed care, suicide prevention training, that kind of stuff. Just talk, give them an induction about listening, but that doesn't, turn them into a social worker. They don't want to be social workers, right? I just want to make sure that they feel empowered to care, but that they, we're not telling them, they don't get turned off by being called I don't know. What are your thoughts? And if anything comes to me, it comes to you later, just send it to me.
I'll run a Facebook page called Our Brother's Keeper.
Yeah. I saw Glenn's thing. Isn't that tied up with the Maroubra boys though?
Nah, mate. So my Brother's Keeper is. But yeah, Our Brother's Keeper, we've sort of researched it and stuff just to make sure there was no association with that. But just that whole Brother's Keeper thing, that you're there for a mate, that no one should walk alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that mixed emotions, like some days people want that aggressive sort of get up, get into it, get them sort of thing. Days soft love sort of thing. So yeah, we try and provide people with that. Just Brother's Keeper, you're there for a mate.
Yeah, and I think the original My Brother's Keeper comes back from Motorcycle Club Heritage, way before it was involved with the Maroubra boys.
Yep,
that's where my take on it is, because I've been on the periphery of a lot of clubs over the years, and that's what it is. It's we are our brother's keeper.
Yeah. But changing the energy, right? Because whatever we're doing now isn't working. The stats for this year aren't looking good. So, what are we going to do differently?
I like your idea of that's sort of where I'd like to see the Brother's Keeper idea go, is that we're just teaching blokes how to have these conversations, how a bloke can look after himself. If you turn around and go, yeah, man, I'm thinking about necking myself. Well, you say that to a couple of the boys down the pub, they're going to turn around and go, oh, fuck, mate, well, what are you doing? Well, no, you don't need to do that, which is sometimes not a good thing to say. Or just giving blokes the the toolbox to be able to have those harder conversations.
Spot on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think, Sam, I'd be interested in your perception on this, is that we have these conversations about, I know Adriel comes up to what works, and all of the campaigns built around what works in metropolitan areas. And, we know, mate, it just doesn't work in rural areas.
Yep.
And how do we do it with countrymen? How do we do it with rural blokes? How do we do it with, people outside of metropolitan areas? Because it's very different.
Within my role at the
and-
moment, working with the mental health council, and that's because I've got background in agriculture, and that was sort of what got
Yep.
me into it, was working with farmers in Queensland and talking to blokes up there that during the drought 7 years ago, there was blokes that were sitting there going, if I face another year of drought, my family are better off if I go and kill myself than what we are facing another year with no income. So
Yep.
it was, like we'll keep always cold beer, country music, and bonfires.
Yeah, also we're not allowed to have fires anymore. We're not allowed to sit around fires and have the campsite chat. But that's
I'd be
what we need to do.
I'd be putting the question to the men themselves.
Yep.
What do
Yeah.
they want to be called?
I like tormentors. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, tormentors.
I reckon that I might add that to my question. I'm going to put it on the Facebook page.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say my suggestion is. Oh, I've had a suggestion. Tormentors. What do you think? Right.
Own it, John.
I quite.
My suggestion.
Oh, yeah. Was that yours?
No, I'm saying own it. Say it's yours.
Oh,
Yep.
no. I'm good at ascribing. The one I did come up with, I love Tongue Master, right? A Lord of the Barbecue. So I was thinking Tongue Master, Lord of the Conversation, but maybe that's like a double entendre. So I don't.
With that barbecue idea, mate, have you heard of Meat Stock?
Meat
Yeah.
stock. No.
Big through New South Wales, Toowoomba, I think he beat in Victoria. I was talking to them the other day about trying to get them down to Tassie because they're thinking about how they can take that mental health approach as well.
Yeah.
So by having people in the crowd that people can go and have conversations with, but it's based around barbecue, like barbecue competitions, but they've got car shows. They've got
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Wow.
like it's bull riding. It's everything in one space. That it's a heap of like everything down to art, all in one place. It's just hobbies that people enjoy that they can go and talk to other like-minded people about.
Yeah.
And they want to sort of know how they can get to some of the people in the crowd and how to get people going. Like you have that brief intervention there where you yarn to someone and then you hand them a card or something, and then they go, "Oh, remember that fellow in the yellow shirt? Yeah, he said to give him a call when I was doing things tough."
Geez, we'd have to find a great name for those guys, like they would be Meat Men or Meet You or something like that. Meet Your Men, all right?
As I said,
Meatheads.
Meatheads.
Yeah,
Meatheads. I love it.
I think
just-
Jason's nailed it with community tools. That's
Yeah.
That's good.
community tools, yeah.
And just being conscious of the time,
Yeah.
we might
We do
wrap
need
up.
to
I'm
wind
going to stop recording and then we can do a quick self-care check out.